Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo 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 Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Surabhyai Namaha
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 Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Hare Krishna. Welcome to our daily Srimad Bhagavatam class. We keep changing place. First time we're having it here, actually. So we are reading from first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam and chapter number 1, which is entitled Questions by the Sages. And we have studied the last 2 days, actually, text number 10, which is a very important instruction for all of us. The whole setting, for those who were not in class yesterday, I mean this class, possibly in some other class, is we are in Naimisharanya, where Sutta Goswami has just returned after hearing the first rendering of the Srimad Bhagavatam by Srila Shukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj, and the sages of Naimisharanya were having their own meeting. It was meant to be a 1,000-year yajna. Did not make it to 1,000 years. So Sutta Goswami, when he returns, the sages are actually praising him and requesting him to take the Vyasa-san so that he can enlighten them, especially because they also know that is one of the special characteristics of self-realized souls. They know present, past, and future. Not all sadhus are referred to as Trikaligya, but Trikaligya, many more people in the past than today were actually Trikaligya. They could even during the time of Lord Chaitanya himself, of course, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Srila Advaita Acharya as well, and other personalities. All the sages could understand that Kali Yuga is beginning, and therefore kindly give us some good instructions how to deal with this terrible situation that is upon us. So today we are going to text 11. Bhurini Bhuri Karmani Srotavyani Vibhagashaha Atah Sadho Atra Yat Saram Samudritya Manishaya Bruhi Bhadraya Bhutanam Yenatma Suprasidati Yenatma Suprasidati, that comes up in a few places. Bhurini bhuri karmani
Bhurini bhuri karmani
srotavyani vibhagashaha
Srotavyani vibhagashaha
ata sadhotra yat saram
Atah sadhotra yatasaram
samudritya manishaya
Samudritya manishaya
bruhi bhadraya bhutanam
Bruhi bhadraya bhutanam
yenatma suprasidati
Yenatma suprasidati
bhurini bhuri karmani
Bhurini bhuri karmani
srotavyani vibhagashaha
Srotavyani vibhagasaha
ata sadhotra yat saram
Atah sadhotra yatasaram
samudritya manishaya
Samudritya manishaya
bruhi bhadraya bhutanam
Bruhi bhadraya bhutanam
yenatma suprasidati
Yenatma suprasidati
bhurini bhuri karmani
Bhurini bhuri karmani
srotavyani vibhagashaha
Srotavyani vibhagashaha
ata sadhotra yat saram
Atah sadhotra yatasaram
samudritya manishaya
Samudritya manishaya
bruhi bhadraya bhutanam
Bruhi bhadraya bhutanam
yenatma suprasidati.
Yenatma suprasidati Bhurini
We can stop here because of time. Bhurini,
Bhurini
multifarious.
Multifarious
Bhuri,
Bhuri
many.
Many
Karmani,
Karmani
duties.
Duties
Srotavyani,
Srotavyani
to be learned.
To be learned
Vibhagashaha,
Vibhagashaha
by divisions
By divisions
of subject matter.
of subject matters
Ataha,
Ataha
therefore, sadho,
Sadho
O sage,
O sage
atra,
Atra
herein,
Herein
yat,
Yet
whatever,
Whatever
saram,
Saram
essence,
Essence
samudritya,
Samudritya
by selection,
By selection
manishaya,
Manishayaha
best of your knowledge,
The best of your knowledge
bruhi,
Bruhi
please tell me,
Please tell me
bhadraya,
Bhadraya
for the good of
For the good of
bhutanam,
Bhutanam,
the living beings,
the living beings
yena,
Yena
by which
By which
atma,
Atma
the self,
The self
suprasidati,
Suprasidati
becomes fully satisfied.
Becomes fully satisfied.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There are many varieties of scriptures, and in all of them there are many prescribed duties, which can be learned only after many years of study in the various divisions. Therefore, O sage, please select the essence of all these scriptures and explain it for the good of all living beings, that by such instruction their hearts may be fully satisfied. Kindly repeat after me. There are many varieties
There are many varieties
of scriptures,
of scriptures,
and in all of them
and in all of them
there are many prescribed duties
there are many prescribed duties
which can be learned
which can be learned
after many years,
after many years,
only after many years
only after many years
of study
of study
in their various divisions.
in their various divisions.
Therefore, O sage,
Therefore, O sage,
please select the essence
please select the essence
of all those scriptures
of all
and explain it
and explain it
for the good of all living beings,
for the good of all living beings,
that by such instruction
that by such instructions
their hearts
their hearts
may be fully satisfied.
may be fully satisfied.
Purport. Atma. Purport. Atma, or self, is distinguished from matter and material elements. It is spiritual in constitution, and thus it is never satisfied by any amount of material planning. All scriptures and spiritual instructions are meant for the satisfaction of this self, or Atma. There are many varieties of approaches which are recommended for different types of living beings in different times and at different places. Consequently, the numbers of revealed scriptures are innumerable. There are different methods and prescribed duties recommended in those various scriptures. Taking into consideration the fallen condition of the people in general in this age of Kali, the sages of Naimisharanya suggested that Sri Sutta Goswami relate the essence of all such scriptures, because in this age it is not possible for the fallen souls to understand and undergo all the lessons of all these various scriptures in a Varna and āśrama system. Very interesting that without any notice, or just very naturally, Srila Prabhupada, at the very end, in the last sentence of this chapter, he mentions Varna and āśrama as if, yeah, that is natural, that is what is meant to be, that is the norm. And then second paragraph, Prabhupada speaks a bit more on this. Just by coincidence. Interesting, huh? That's okay. The Varna and Ashram society, everyone should concentrate on hearing. On hearing this, not that. It is Shravanam, it's okay. The Varna and Ashrama society, I mean, Bhagavatam does speak about Dronacharya, so this is partial presentation of Drona. So it's not completely out of Shastra. Dronacharya. The Varna and Ashrama society. You have come at the right time, Prabhu.
His question.
This time was watering something, or
Yes.
yeah, difficult to get away from. So the Varna and āśrama society was considered to be the best institution for lifting the human being to the spiritual platform. But due to Kali Yuga, it is not possible to execute the rules and regulations of these institutions, nor is it possible for the people in general to completely sever relations with their families as the Varnasrama institution prescribes. The whole atmosphere is surcharged with opposition, and considering this, one can see that spiritual emancipation for the common man in this age is very difficult. The reason the sages presented this matter to Sri Sutta Goswami is explained in the following verses. Yeah. I will repeat the translation. The sages of Naimisharanya speaking to Sutta Goswami. There are many varieties of scriptures, and in all of them there are many prescribed duties which can be learned only after many years of study in their various divisions. Therefore, O sage, please select the essence of all these scriptures and explain it for the good of all living beings, that by such instruction their hearts may be fully satisfied. So a number of points we can speak on. Actually, the Vedic literatures they are indeed very vast, and for all kinds of, we could say, mentalities. Just like the Puranas, 18 Puranas, we understand how 6 of those Puranas are especially for those in the mode of goodness, 6 are for those in the mode of passion, so 6 for those in the mode of tamagun, or ignorance. And also our acharyas explain that because the vast majority of people in the world are heavily conditioned, I mean everyone in the material world is conditioned. Rare are those who are not born conditioned. Some, but very few. That means that the Vedic literatures, at least a large portion of the Vedic literatures, are to gradually bring people by performing, let's say, pious activities. Therefore we have this section of Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, and Upasana Kanda. But above all of those are the instructions that we could say in many ways are more concealed, and are especially for those who are ready to perform pure bhakti, pure devotional service. And of course the Bhagavatam, that is the special feature and uniqueness of the Bhagavatam. It is giving us that essence, the essence and the culminating point, we could say. Therefore, part of the Bhagavatam, the end portion, is referred to as the Samam Bonam. The topmost revelation is in the Bhagavatam. Now, of course, Prabhupada here in the second paragraph makes reference to Varna and āśrama, and does mention that actually, well, some people when reading this purport who are not so inclined to Varnasrama will say, you see, Prabhupada is telling. Bas.
I got the answer.
Yeah. But we have to continue reading. We have to hear the rest of the instructions that are given in the Bhagavatam, and in so many conversations and etc. Of course, the main source of reference for all of us is the Bhagavatam, and there are so many many times that Srila Prabhupada is speaking about Varnasrama, and so many verses as well. And of course we all know, most of us understand how it is not an easy subject matter. One of the reasons being that it is Kali Yuga also, and it is a fact, and Prabhupada makes this statement, which is factual, that it is very difficult to implement, let's say, what used to be the kind of very high level where individuals follow very strictly, and for example, vanaprastha at the age of 50, one would give up family life. It is more difficult, although Srila Prabhupada, even though we are 5,000 years down the line of Kali Yuga, and we all know how, especially in the last few hundred years, the situation has become more and more, has become very degraded. Still, we should understand that the basic, we could say, principles upon which the system of Varna and āśrama is based, those principles remain valid today. And one of the reasons, which is explained by our acharyas, is that this system is actually an eternal system. One may say, well, it's material, how it can be eternal? Well, that is understood and explained actually in the Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? Because that is one argument sometimes people they will present, that Varnasrama is material, therefore it's not eternal. But the system of Varna and Ashrama is eternal because it is connected with Prakriti. So we know from Bhagavatam there are 5 tattvas, 5 principles that are eternal. Actually, not all 5 of them are eternal. Ishvara, Jiva, Kala, and Prakriti, they are eternal. And of course, the 5th one, which is karma, is not eternal. Yeah. So Prakriti, the gunas, the modes of material nature, are connected with the system of Varna and Ashrama. It's a very interesting and very involved subject matter, actually, because one may debate, one may argue that Varnasrama is not connected with Varna, and others will say, of course, Varnasrama is connected with Varna and Ashrama. So one needs to, our acharyas, more recently especially, have helped us to understand about Varnasrama by giving it the name Daiva Varnasrama. If one performs nicely Daiva Varnasrama, that is above the gunas, that is above the modes of material nature. That is also bhakti, that is also pure devotional service. This is nicely explained by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And therefore, our recent acharyas especially have emphasized this type of Varnasrama. In other words, when Varnasrama, as it is meant to do, is connecting us with Krishna, when it is performed for the pleasure of Krishna, Haritoshanam, that is also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, then that type of Varnasrama is desired. And of course, even if that connection is not there, that still remains in society the standard and natural way by which people more easily can live and interact amongst themselves. So that's why these 2 levels, they need to be taken into consideration all the time. And when we fail to do that, we create actually an imbalance. Here, for example, Prabhupada is speaking about Atma on the spiritual level, the self. What is the last line here is Yen Atma Suprasidati, yeah. Then in another verse that is coming up later in the Bhagavatam, which we were mentioning just a few days ago, Savai Pumsam Parodharmo Tito Bhakti Radhog Saje Ahaitukya Pratihata Yagatma Suprasidati, Atma Suprasidati. And in that verse, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that Atma refers not only to the spirit soul, but Atma also refers to the body and refers to the mind. So that is actually the, we could say, the nature of Sanskrit, the beauty of Sanskrit, in that depending on the context, the same word may refer to something or may refer to another thing. So very important for us, especially I would say in the Krishna consciousness movement, to understand these two aspects of Atma, or these two dimensions of life, which in many ways are dealing with what is being discussed here, the sages are asking Sutta Goswami, please speak about what is the essence. Please speak about what is essential for us to actually become fully satisfied. And there are two ways in which we can become fully satisfied. One is on the spiritual level, and one is on the material level. We read in the Bhagavatam how when one is actually knowledgeable spiritually, when one is following dharma, then we read this yesterday in the purport, by being spiritual, by practicing spiritual life, automatically material opulence will come, isn't it? We were reading that just yesterday or the day before, yeah. Material opulence, material well-being, material meeting our material necessities of life will naturally come when we are practicing spiritually. And so therefore, meeting our material necessities of life, in other words, is also dharma, is also part of dharma. It is part of Varnasrama dharma. It is actually, the whole system of Varna and Asrama are to help individuals, to help us in a simplified way meet our basic necessities of life so that we can give or devote the maximum amount of time for spiritual activities, for spiritual self-realization, isn't it? So that's why in the Bhagavatam, for example, when we come to the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, when we come to the 7th canto, we hear the whole presentation by Srila Narada Muni on the subject matter of Varnasrama. So in other words, those who believe or those who misunderstand that Varnasrama is not really important are an important aspect that is there in the Bhagavatam. Agree, the Bhagavatam is especially focusing on the primary spiritual aspect or dimension of life, which is what will satisfy the Atma or the self, the spiritual self, living entity, and of course that is Bhakti, devotional activities. At the same time, we get information, and that's important for us, especially in the context of modern day society. We get information how also we should live materially. In what social system, what is the ideal social system that will make our lives more simple, that will allow us to meet our basic needs. Just like we read in the Bhagavatam how during the reign of Lord Ramachandra, or even Yudhisthira Maharaj, whenever there are great saintly kings, Vaishnava kings, because a Vaishnava king knows about dharma, and he knows how to actually engage his citizens, how to live in such a way that they can meet their basic needs and necessities and be happy in this way, be healthy, and simultaneously be engaged in spiritual transcendental activities. So in other words, when we only focus on one or the other, we create an imbalance. When we only look at the spiritual aspect and neglect the material condition, the material dimension, because we are here in the material world after all, and every day this body has basic needs and necessities, then we tend to create an imbalance. And the same is true, of course. Modern day society is mostly focused on material well-being, material development, economic development, and forgetting about the spiritual dimension of life. So in other words, when we speak about dharma, we have to keep these two dimensions in mind all the time. And we have to endeavor to balance both. And that is not so easy to do, especially in Kali Yuga. And of course, one of the important instructions we will hear is that this is not possible without Guru, without a bona fide spiritual master who is knowledgeable about Shastra, who is knowledgeable about Dharma, and who knows actually how to balance these two aspects. So it's very interesting how in the beginning of the purport here, Prabhupada begins with Atma, by explaining Atma as the spiritual self, living entity. And in the second paragraph, he speaks, even at the end of the first paragraph, in the last line, the last few words of that first paragraph, he makes reference to Varna and āśrama. And then in the second paragraph, he further elaborates. Of course, he does mention that it is extremely difficult in Kali Yuga, and it is not, what we read in the Shastra as to how people were practicing 5,000 years ago or more. That kind of level may not be possible in Kali Yuga. However, the basic principles of the Varnas and āśramas, because whether we were living, let's say, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, or whatever, or even 100,000 years before, people had the same body and had the same gunas to deal with, isn't it? So when we understand the basic principles behind these gunas and how they are related also with Varna and āśrama, then in whatever yuga we may be living in, then we can take these principles, we can take these concepts and apply them to the best of our ability in whatever condition that we are in. So that's why Prabhupada would say that one of the basic principles, for example, has to do with the concept of sustainability, self-sufficiency. So Prabhupada said, this is not only an instruction for people in India. Anywhere, anyone, in any part of the world can live based on these principles, where obviously the main goal and objective and the main focus is meant to be our spiritual development or self-realization, and to facilitate. And that's the important point, which we generally miss even as devotees. To facilitate our spiritual growth, to facilitate the process of self-realization. The system of Varna and āśrama is the ideal system. And all of our acharyas make this important statement, that one will more easily be able to progress or advance in spiritual life by following the prescribed system of Varna and āśrama established by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. So we will be hearing more, of course, in the next verses related to these topics. We generally keep a few minutes for any possible comments, realizations, or questions on what we have read and heard. So the field is open, not the floor, but the field. No floor here. Yes.
Varna and āśrama, this both of different same Maharaj, both of one word.
When you put them together, it's one word. But you can separate it. All right, but there are two things. One is social division, Varna. Varna means social division.
Is on the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. That one.
Varna.
Varna has to, yes. Varna has social division. we think of Varna in terms of occupation. What activity you will do in society, that is Varna, isn't it? Yeah. And āśrama has to do with the different stages of life, beginning with the early stage or student life, brahmachari, like that. So both are there, both are part of life, and therefore when we understand how they are interrelated also, just like Prabhupada would explain, first is Varna. First we should know what is our Varna. When we know what is a Varna, then that will help us understand what our āśrama will be. Yeah. It's actually when we take the time, and that's the problem, most of us don't take the time, because in Kali we don't have time. When we take the time to actually properly study and understand the whole system of Varna and āśrama, we begin to realize how very, very deep subject matter and how very scientific it is. You know, just like the science of the soul, Atma Gyan, that is very deep subject matter, very scientific, and also unchanging. It is an eternal situation, isn't it? Eternal qualities, eternal nature of the soul. The same is there actually for Varna and āśrama. The principles upon which it is based, they are also eternal principles. So when we especially focus on what is eternal and we apply those principles, then our life becomes very simplified. And just like it's mentioned here, suprasidati, then we can begin to experience, you know, when our lives are simplified, when our mind is peaceful, when we're not disturbed, we become satisfied. And we can only become satisfied by these two things, by knowing about the nature and what is meant to be the activity of the spirit soul on the spiritual transcendental platform, and by knowing what is meant to be our material way of doing things, which is intimately connected with your backyard, your garden, agriculture. Yeah. Agriculture, you see, we have, by deviating from agriculture, we have actually deviated from dharma. Because, we were discussing this point as well, the vast majority of householders, for those who may not know, how many are householders here? The majority of householders are meant to be connected with land and cows. The whole society is actually meant to be connected with land and cows. That is Vedic culture. Vedic culture. Culture of land, cows, and of course Krishna. Yeah. Cows, land, and Krishna. That is what's going on in the spiritual world. That is the reality of Goloka. And that's where we're supposed to be going. Yeah. Any other thought?
You said there is two part, spiritual part and second is Varnasrama.
I said two parts. I said spiritual and material. Yeah.
Varnasrama is material.
Varnasrama is material but can become spiritualized so that when it is Daiva Varnasrama, it no longer is material.
Then one person how go from spiritual to Varnasrama or following the Varnasrama gradually it will be goes to spiritual easily.
How to go to the spiritual level?
Yes, from direct.
No, Maharaj, he asking
He's asking.
that
Okay. He knows your question more.
actually
He'll clarify your question.
actually we were discussing once.
Oh, that's right. Great Pandit. Okay.
So he's asking that by following Varnasrama dharma, this Daiva Varnasrama dharma, or by following only chanting of names of Lord name, one can go to the spiritual realm. One can go to the spiritual world easily which is the easier process? He's asking that.
Okay, so the question is, which is the easiest process? Just sitting and chanting Hare Krishna or following Varnasrama Dharma? Is it?
Yes.
How long can you sit and chant Hare Krishna?
2 hours not doing it.
Prabhupada actually made this argument. Made this point. Where are the Haridas Thakur? Who can chant, 22 hours? 192. Who can chant 192 rounds? 3 lakhs of names a day. Haridas Thakur was chanting. During the time of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, I'm sure you've heard this before, Prabhupada would make reference. My Guru Maharaj used to say, if one doesn't chant 64 rounds, he's an animal. God. and Haridas Thakur was doing 3 times 64. What is 3 times 64?
192.
192.
192 rounds.
Can you imagine? Can't imagine. We're struggling with our 16 rounds. So therefore, Prabhupada wanted us to do our 16 rounds and the rest of the time on site.
No, not.
For us, on site. Yeah, to be engaged. And so Prabhupada was very expert in engaging, in giving so many different activities or projects so that we are in a practical way engaged, and that's purifying us as well. Yeah.
Maharaj, I have a question that now many of our devotees are engaged in temple services. And,
Not many of our devotees. But anyways, go ahead.
So how to make them understand that this Varna and āśrama, Varnasrama, how to make them understand?
How to make them understand about Varna and āśrama.
And so that they can be engaged accordingly.
Well, it is not, but one way to help our, let's say, city folks or city devotees, because mostly our devotees are in the big cities, one way to help both our city devotees as well as city people is to bring them here or bring them to the country. That is one practical way. And another way is we are recommending that people read this book speaking about Varnasrama. In other words, unless people begin to understand by hearing especially what Srila Prabhupada spoke and explained about Varnasrama, then the tendency will be to give it less importance, or to give it no importance, or to reject it, unfortunately, as some devotees are doing. So people need to be exposed. It needs to be presented, and it takes some time also. It takes some time to understand the importance of this whole dimension of life. And of course, as we all know, Prabhupada explained that 50% of his mission was to establish Varnasrama. So he gave it a lot of importance. If anyone is, people should be desiring and also eager to understand what are the desires of our founder Acharya. So, yeah.
They also put a statement like this, Maharaj, that preaching is the essence.
Yes,
So
and Varnasrama is part of preaching.
They told that most of people are living in cities. So for
Most of the people are living in the cities, but they should not be in the cities.
Yes, Maharaj. So according, they are telling that most of people are in cities. So we should live in cities and try to preach them all and at once if they are ready, then they can come back to
Yeah,
the
but most devotees who, first of all, most devotees who are in the cities are not very much engaged in preaching.
yeah, all of them are not engaged. They are engaged.
A small percentage actually engaged in preaching. We should understand, and this is the point that Prabhupada explains also, that the modern setup of what we call urbanization is not natural. This is not the standard. The vast majority of people are not meant to live in urban areas. The vast majority of people are meant to live in the country, are meant to live in villages, you see. So unless our devotees in the cities understand this, what they will preach to people? They need to understand these. That's the point I'm trying to make. Naturally, they will tell people, encourage people to chant Hare Krishna, which is fine, which is actually the basis. Even for Varnasrama, the basis for Varnasrama to actually become successful is the chanting of the holy name, isn't it? So that is why, and it comes back to a very basic instruction given by Srila Prabhupada during his physical presence with us. That is why we need to establish Varnasrama colleges. Varnasrama colleges to facilitate our devotees who are too old to go to Gurukul. They've missed their years of Gurukul, but they can go to Varnasrama college and learn about the Varnasrama system and its importance in society. So every temple, Prabhupada wanted that we have Varnasrama college to introduce and explain and train individuals on these concepts and principles of Varnasrama. And we're going to start our Varnasrama college very soon, every year in January. So January is like not too far away. We might start a little early because we have some devotees. It's like Pune is making the headlines, Two groups of Pune, we never get so much visitors from Pune. So some of our guests who also came yesterday they'll be here for a few months, and so we might get a head start of our Varnasrama college. But every year in January we have Varnasrama college here at our ISKCON. So possibly we can. Is there any question else?
Not a question.
Okay.
I stayed before Mumbai.
You were staying in Mumbai.
Yeah, I am not too much chanting.
Not too much chanting.
I am going that library, Radharasa Bihari.
Acha.
Juhu.
Juhu.
There is I go on take one book. I don't know which book, but I open that read. That is purport. Prabhupada. After I know that Prabhupada purport that these things.
Okay.
There is Prabhupada in Bhagavatam. Which Canto I don't know, but
Okay.
I read there. In Kali Yuga only agriculture is no sinful activity. Agriculture is there is pious activity. I read that close and come immediately. After I search, who can help me? I want to doing agriculture. That is I searching Guru Maharaj.
Okay. See, that is.
He's very fortunate.
That is how powerful one purport of Prabhupada is.
Only one line.
One line. Agriculture is the only activity that is not sinful, practically speaking. Because agriculture is known as being, it is referred to as the noblest profession. Most simple, and because one is so closely, intimately connected with nature.
Yes,
So in other words, when we get close to nature, we get close to Krishna because it's Krishna's nature. That's a very nice realization that Krishna gave you.
Yes,
Go
Maharaj.
immediately, go to agriculture.
Yes, Maharaj, this gives a bliss also. I was also mentioning to Prabhuji that his whole family today, they were putting seeds in the ground. So the whole family were putting seeds. So this, only by seeing this gives bliss.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's also very nice. Correct. Yes. And this is what the whole purport is all about: how to become blissful, how to become fully satisfied. Let us plant more and more seeds. That's also part of our Varnasrama, of course. Okay, we'll close here for now. Jai Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Sri Prabhupada ki, Gaura Pimanam. Hare Krishna.